Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this week. I'm Liz Mangus, Literacy Specialist with Saddleback Educational Publishing. We have a great session planned for you. LeAnn Nicholson is back joining us for your third webinar, I think.
This is the third one, yes.
So we're very excited. We always love when LeAnn comes to visit with us because we know we're going to get great, extremely helpful and relevant content. So we'll get started right at 3 o'clock Eastern time. You know the routine. You know where your control bar is. It is in the bottom of your web browser window. We do want you to chat with us today. So please don't forget that when you open up the chat, select everyone before you send your message so that we can all see what you have to say. If you have questions as we go throughout the presentation, don't be shy. Go ahead and put those in the Q&A. And then if you'd like to take advantage of subtitles, you can select live transcript and then click on show subtitles, and you should be good to go with that. Don't forget, we are on Twitter. Saddleback is on Twitter. LeAnn is on Twitter. So say hello, follow us, let us know what you think. And I would just like to acknowledge that I do know that it is summer break, and I do know there are actually a lot of other virtual events and conferences happening this week too. So I think many of you will be joining us on the recording. We don't want to forget about you. Thank you for attending, no matter if it's online or live now or catching the recording later. But doesn't matter if it's a year from now. If you're watching this video, you can go to Twitter, let us know you caught it. You know, just let everybody know what a great learning opportunity this is. All right, let's see who is here. If you could go to the chat, please, and select everyone, and then let us know where you're joining us from. And while you're doing that, let's say hello to LeAnn. How are you, friend?
I am good. It is so awesome to be back, and what an honor to be with Saddleback. So thank you so much for inviting me.
We're very excited to have you. As I said, this is your third go round on the webinar platform. So we always know that we're going to have a full 60-minute action-packed session with lots of great things that we can apply in the classroom. So
from all over the place. We have Pakistan and Canada. And
welcome.
St. Louis, and I am from Alton, Illinois. That is, my roots are Alton, Illinois.
And Sherry's here. Sherry always likes to join us and make sure that we have our representation from Canada, and we love it. So thank you, Sherry.
Yay. Thank you, Sherry.
and then she always says things like, oh, it's 70 degrees here. And then I get jealous and because it's blazing hot. I don't know about you, where you are, LeAnn, but LeAnn is on Twitter. Yes.
It's L Nicholson 1. I think it's on that slide right in front of you.
Yes.
And I am giving a nice gift. The best connection during the training will receive my new book. So I'll be choosing that right after this webinar.
Awesome. We always love a book giveaway here on the Saddleback webinar series. And this is a great book, everybody. So I'm glad you're joining, and I'm glad you're here to learn about it because you're going to walk away with some great tools and ideas. So, well, let's get to it. I know LeAnn has a lot to share with us. So welcome, everybody. We are here to talk about questions, student-generated questions, to be precise, that will lead to powerful discussion. So we know that having students take ownership and have students take the lead definitely increases engagement and produces effective learning, right? So how can we work that into what we do? LeAnn is here to discuss this with us today. She is the author or co-author of more than 13 books and former Teacher of the Year. And she has a passion for maximizing learning for all students. She delivers presentations nationally and internationally and right here on the Saddleback webinar platform. So thank you so much for agreeing to be with us again. And I will let you take it from here.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. Welcome, everybody, to student-generated questions that lead to powerful discussions. And yes, you'll see a picture of the book that is going to be coming out July 15th, they say. The date has been changed a couple of times just because of I guess you could say, photocopying of the books. They're having challenges with that all over the world, evidently. But I'm taking one component of the literacy triangle and I'm going to focus in on it and give you one amazing power tool. And by the way, here is our tweet. I guess you could say our Twitter handle, so that you will tweet out a connection. I will look after this webinar. And so the people that are present, you have the opportunity to win. So you just have to tweet something, maybe take a picture, something that connects with you. But my name is LeAnn, and I have lived and taught in the following states. I've taught K through 8. My roots are from Alton, Illinois, so a little shout out to Ann from St. Louis. And I did teach in Gardner, Edgerton, Kansas. I saw another Kansas participant. I taught in Grapevine Colleyville School District in Texas for several years. This is where I start thinking we're part of the witness protection plan and my husband's not telling me something, but we moved a lot. I taught in Ohio, Lakota School District, and then I started doing more consulting / coaching for schools for Dr. Eric Jensen when we were in Danbury, Connecticut area. I had the wonderful opportunity to become one of Jensen's certified brain research trainers, which just transformed me as a teacher. And then little did I know I would be helping so many teachers after that. And now we live in Georgia, in the Atlanta area, and it is pretty hot here. According to my computer, it says it is 88 degrees. But also mother twins, very proud mother twins. So you'll see a picture of Keaton, graduated from Georgia Tech, and you will see a picture of Aubrey, who graduated from Auburn, Alabama. And anyway, they are just the highlights of my life. So let's get started by just placing our minds in a positive state of mind. We know through a lot of research that when placed in a positive state, mood, or emotion, the brain is up to 31% more efficient compared to a negative mood. So right now, I would love for you to add to the chat box, write something that you're grateful for or you're looking forward to. Just choose one for time's sake. So in the chat box, what are you grateful for? What's something that happened to you today or yesterday or last week that you just want to give praise to? Or optimism, something that you're looking forward to. And we know both of those words are huge, and we're going to have to really tap into them as often as possible. They are game changers when it comes to learning. So in the chat box, please type in something that you are looking forward to or grateful. And Rachel's from Olathe. Rachel, I have your example in here. I'm so excited you're on here. Rachel, thank you. Rachel contributed a lot to the book. Okay, your health. I love it. Yes, we took our health for granted a little bit before COVID. Summer weather to work in your garden. That's wonderful news. Students back in the library. Yes, touching the books actually and not fearing it. I love it. I'm grateful for the long summer break, Sherry. Thank you so much. And the opportunity for self-directed professional development that Saddleback is giving you today. Enjoy the summer, relaxing. It is about summer, isn't it? That is just July. We are so excited. Someone just says life. You're right, Ricky. Just life in general. We're so grateful for it. And yes, a little bit of the heat, breaking heat records in Texas, walking. I love taking walks, one of my favorite things to do. Thank you guys so much. I can't read them all, but I'm so grateful that you are contributing. So let's get started. What's in it for you in this power hour? So go ahead and put your right hand up in the air and turn the dial to WII FM. And now that you are tuned into my radio station, I'm going to share what's in it for you. Now, a while back, I had the wonderful honor of introducing the literacy triangle. I've been doing trainings about literacy triangle for years. I've used the literacy triangle concept or process in my classroom for years. And I'll tell you right now, we've got a lot of reading, I guess you could say, programs out there that people purchase that somehow don't always bring reading, discussing, and writing together. Sometimes they're isolated, but we know that when we bring them together and that while we're reading, we have a thinking job and we really focus and we annotate for that thinking job. And then we have discussions about that thinking job. We have discussions about what we were looking for, questions that popped into our heads. And then we ask kids to write about what they read and what they discussed. Writing gets a whole bunch easier. It makes sense, doesn't it? When we write about things that we've read and we've discussed, we have more self-efficacy and, quite frankly, confidence to say, yes, I can do a better job with my writing. Because I don't know about you, but I had a lot of reluctant writers here and there. And one of the top ways to motivate them to want to write is to make sure they knew a lot about it and had some affirmation with their peers in the classroom. So I'm taking that one little purple box called discuss, and we're going to go a little bit deeper with discussions today. So that I'm very excited about. I get to hone in on one power tool to get your students to design better questions. So in module number 1, I do want to give you the research. So by the end of module 1, just a short, sweet little chunk of information, you will be able to explore and summarize the big picture and key research findings about rich discussions and other literacy tools and how they improve learning. And then module number 2, we can explore a 3-step process called PIP to encourage students to design questions before, during, or after learning or reading. And these questions will guide deeper discussions and writing. And so that's what we get. That's what's in it for us today. So we're going to go from research to how to have excellent discussions. I'm just going to bring in, I'm going to say my top 5 pointers for discussions. And then I'm going to hone in on one power tool called PIP. And it is loaded with research. So I'm going to ask you to participate. Some of you are so excited about that. By the way, you will definitely want to go get my packet. The packet has the slides, but it also has 3 Word documents attached at the end that I know you'll love. They're great cheat sheets, and I love cheat sheets as a teacher. So I would love for you to add to the chat box right now. We know that before learning begins, we should always APK their brains. And I'm going to practice what I preach. The teachers who take the time to activate the beautiful neural networks in their students' brains on the topic that they're about to teach, those students will have a stronger memory. They'll have stronger connections. We've had that research for years. So right now you get to answer number 1 or number 2 in the chat box. Just put a 1 and then answer it, then put a 2 and then answer that one, but just choose one. Your first question is, what struggles are you noticing among your students when they design their own questions? Or you can answer number 2. What discussion tool or strategy do you know that works very well with your students? So go ahead and add it to the chat box. You do not need to have complete sentences this time. Sherry, wonderful. You're right. A lot of students just expect the teacher to ask the questions. They're not used to designing their own questions because we're not giving them the opportunities. Beautifully said. Thank you. Sometimes our questions are closed, okay, instead of open-ended questions where there's just a simple yes, no, or right here answer. You are exactly right, Beth. Thank you. You have to know something in order to ask a good question. You are right, Bonnie. We have to understand the vocabulary even that we might include in our question. The language structure for questioning, absolutely. And low frequency questions, they don't force the brain to go deep. You guys, you know so much about questioning already and some of the struggles. I'm going to address some of those struggles as well today. So let's first and foremost get into module number 1, which is we can explore and summarize the big picture and key research findings about rich discussions and how they improve learning. If you had this dial sitting right outside your door of your classroom, would you turn the dial every day to maximize your impact? Yes, you would totally take the time to turn the dial to the green so you can maximize your impact for all the students. And we know more than ever how to do that because of the John Hattie's, the Marzanos out there who love to do research. And when I say research, they do meta-analyses where they will pull together a whole bunch of research on a particular topic, for example, like homework, and they plug it in to the effect size equation, which you can find on Khan Academy. I actually had to do this in my classroom with some research, and out pops this number. And this number is called an effect size. And if the effect size is high, it can produce very high student achievement. If the effect size is low, it's probably not going to hurt the students, but possibly could waste your time. And you may have more reteaching and more frustration. And we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So in education, we want to make sure that we are using the highest impact tools. And I'm so grateful that John Hattie gave us this barometer of influence. It's my favorite visual. Because basically he's saying if an educational factor, process, strategy, or tool has an effect size of zero point 0.4 or more, it's worth our time. The blue zone. We're going for that blue zone. But not everything in that blue zone is treated equally. So if something has an effect size of 0.4 to 0.6, it's going to give you about 1 year of gain. That's awesome. We signed up for that. If you teach fifth grade, which I taught a lot of fifth grade, I know Rachel does too. If you teach fifth grade, you have you've got to make sure that they master those fifth grade standards. That's 1 year gain. But if you receive some fifth graders who are a little bit behind, or a whole year behind, or 2 years behind, which is why I love Saddleback books. We sign up for them. We sign up to get them caught up. You're going to have to use tools that are 0.6 or more to get them caught up, because around the effect size of 1.00, you can get 2 years of gain smashed into one school year. Jaw dropper, right? I mean, that's huge. That's gigantic. So I want everyone to memorize this. 1.00 is about 2 years of gain in one school year. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some literacy tools. I'm going to show you their effect size based on where I gathered it from. You're going to see some numbers that are a little bit different when you see them over here or on that website, but I went to the middle of the road ones. Here are some high impact reading tools, strategies, or processes. Look at the left-hand column. I know that may look overwhelming to you, but I just wanted you to have a listing of them. I can't cover all of those today, but this is part of my training. I will only train using the highest impact tools. And that means 0.4s or more, but I really lately am going to 0.6s or more because we've got to get a lot of students caught up. Now, this tool I'm going to say for the very end, it just has 3 steps. It's called PIP. I'm going to make you wonder what it's all about. Don't look ahead in the slides. But PIP is going to help integrate background knowledge. There's definitely metacognition occurring. Okay, and students being able to explain their thinking as well. It's identifying similarities and differences sometimes, if that's the question that they design. It's summarizing. It can be synthesizing across many texts, depending on how you use the tool. And it can even be a process or part of reciprocal teaching. So I'm just sharing with you, these are some reading tool strategies or processes that can have a very high impact. All the areas that are blue, those are in a lot of my trainings, and they can be part of any type of reading, discussing, or writing lesson. So they go into everything. They're just all inclusive, basically. Now, here's some discussion tool effect size. I highlighted all of them because the PIP tool that I'm going to give you is definitely classroom discussion based. Your students will have an amazing discussion or writing opportunity based on the questions that they design during the reading or after the reading. And I'm just so glad Rachel's on here, because Rachel, I am going to ask you to add to the chat box when we get to your example. But jigsaw method, you could definitely use the PIP tool through the jigsaw method. And peer tutoring sometimes, cooperative learning for sure. This is a group of students designing a set of questions that they have interest in based on a purpose that you share with them. And then writing. Writing's gigantic, but you can end the whole PIP strategy with a piece of writing. And look at the very last number in the purple over here in the left-hand column. Writing has an impact of a 1.47 effect size. That's huge impact when it comes to learning. And this is kids writing about what they're learning, or writing about the answers to the questions that they even designed. Okay, so I gave you some research about this literacy triangle. The book is supposed to come out July 15th, any day now. I have been waiting on the edge of my seat for this book. And this is the big picture of the entire book. And we have over 50 strategies for more reading, more discussing, and more writing. And we integrate the 3. We don't even like to separate them. We integrated them the best that we possibly could throughout the entire book. And we hope you'll use it. You can use it with any type of reading resource that you are currently using, even district-wide. I want to share some more research with you. I love Mike Schmoker, and he has his 2nd edition book out called Focus. And he says, ask students to read about and discuss their topic before writing. These 2 skills help students create more coherent, logical, and precise thoughts and language. While writing, new thoughts are often created. and build on new insights gleaned from reading and discussion. And then I love this one pointer: writing takes thinking to the next level. So my hope is you will take this PIP tool that I give you and you'll extend it into a beautiful piece of writing with your students. Hey, even Daniel Willingham, one of the best cognitive psychologists out there that all kinds of educators tap into, has a whole book called The Reading Mind. There's so much research in there about the reading. And he's also known as kind of being one of those science of reading experts. Love quoting him. But he said students remember what they think about. Well, that makes sense. So we asked them to think about questions that will pop in their head while they're reading. We're going to ask them to talk about what they think the answers might be. And we're going to ask them to go back to the text and find the answers as well. And then my hope is they have a beautiful, deep discussion about it. And my also big hope is that they will write about it. That's the ultimate goal, is my hope. And we have more research that says when students talk and work together, they learn more. We even know that the brain changes drastically after discussions. And when the discussions are a little emotional and it's super relevant, the benefits increase in memory and definitely improve social skills as well. So meaningful talk is crucial to language development and students' ability to speak, think, understand, read, write, and communicate. And one way students learn words is by hearing them used in diverse contexts, by asking questions about them, and by discussing them with peers and teachers. So this PIP tool is going to take care of all this research and even research about adolescent reading. Look at pointer number 2 right here. Conversations and discussions regarding text have to be authentic and student initiated and teacher facilitated. You can't just give them PIP and hope for the best. You're going to have to model it. I'm going to give you step-by-step ways to model it, I promise you. And we have to remember, learning is always social and transactional, because we know, bottom line, to learn, students must talk. So I'm going to share with you pointers on how to have better discussions through the PIP strategy. So I bet you can guess what this word is. I love it when I ask my students to try to predict what word goes in the blank. So anybody want to predict? Anybody want to type in the chat box? Okay, you got it. Ask or generate. And of course, I'm going to use the word generate because that's in the title of the workshop today. Asking readers to generate questions while reading. Now, it can be after reading as well, but getting them to say, what does the author mean here, is actually going to help them with their hiccups during reading. But while reading was the strongest scientifically based evidence of 7 strategies that improve reading comprehension. The National Reading Association talks about this quite a bit. And there's this one book. Now you're probably thinking, oh, should I buy this book? It is awesome. This book right here will tell you the research behind PIP. All I did was simplify it as a teacher, and I used it in my classroom, and I saw the benefits of it. Little did I realize that one day it would actually be in another published work, but obviously synthesized, okay? So if you want to go deeper into PIP and want to understand everything about it, you will want to read this book, because this book says just make one change. Teach your students to ask their own questions. And all I did was simplify it. And in fact, this book says, the book begins with a seemingly simple request to get students to ask their own questions. But at heart, it's a book about creating a classroom alive with dialogue, inquiry, and respect for students' minds. You see, when you get your students to design questions about learning, which we've done for years, KWL, right? We've all done KWL, but you're honoring their brains when you do that. You're giving them a voice in the classroom as well. So I do want to give all credit to these 2 amazing authors who did years of research with this one tool in several different contexts, not just the classroom. So right now in the chat box, I gave you lots of different types of research. What research, maybe it was an effect size, stood out to you the most and why? If you can light up the chat box, I'd appreciate that. Was it an effect size? Was it the impact of generating questions? Was it the whole idea of reading, discussing, writing? Okay, yes, the last slide about asking questions. Writing takes thinking to the next level. Way to quote it. Okay. Learning more about Hattie's barometer of influence. You just Google it. You will see it everywhere. And the book is called Visible Learning. It is possibly the #1 selling book in education in the world. Visible Learning. He has some newer books out about literacy and math, where he incorporates the effect sizes. Similarities and differences. Absolutely, Anne. Way to catch that one. Okay, thank you guys for contributing so much. Learning target #2. Here we go. Here's the big one. We can explore a 3-step process called PIP to encourage students to design questions before, during, or after learning or reading. And by the way, these questions will guide deeper discussions in writing, but I'm going to go there first. I'm going to talk about no matter what question you give the students, whether you give it to them or whether the students actually create it or generate it themselves, I want to give you the tools for deeper discussions in your classroom. This is a book I highly recommend. Love Sandy's work and Kara's work, but it's called Deep Discourse. And I have permission to share a wonderful, I'm going to say, summary of the differences between student-led discussions and teacher-led discussions. Now, by the way, hint, hint, you need both. The students need to see you model good questions that you ask them, and also how to take turns, right? Take turns discussing ideas and also honor each other's ideas. So teacher-led discussions are very important and we need to do them. And we need to have more student-led discussions. So let me share with you how they define student-led discussions. Students are active participants in their learning and the discussion process. PIP is 100% that. Students develop their own questions. That's PIP. And they're responsible for the flow of conversation. In PIP, I still guide it quite a bit. And Rachel's going to show you I'm going to show you her example, but hopefully she'll chime in. And she had to guide the process to get the amazing questions that she did from her students. Students work collaboratively, often in self-selected groups and with other learners based on need or interest. The learning requires active participation, whereby students seek meaning and construct their own knowledge. I mean, when they create these questions, they're going to have to decide where are they going to go to get the answers. It may not be in the resource that you have chosen for them. Instead, it might be something that they're going to have to Google, or you might have several resources ready to go for their research. Students monitor their learning with assistance and feedback. Teachers, you're going to be walking around that room, giving them feedback and asking questions to help them say, here's why I created this question. And then students understand expectations and are encouraged to monitor progress through the use of self and small group assessments. So we need both. We have the research that says there are benefits to both, but look at student-led discussions. There are more advantages to student-led discussions than teacher-led discussions. Now we need both. Remember that. Just keep remembering that. Now, I bet some of you showed up just for the next 2 slides I'm about to share with you. And so I'm going to do like a drum roll, drum roll, drum roll. Here we go. Here are 5 steps for effective discussions. And no matter what, whether you use PIP or not, here are 5 steps for effective discussions. Now, here's your thinking job while I read it to you. Normally, if I were in person, I'd have you read it with a partner because I want as much reading occurring in my workshops and I want as much discussion occurring. And then I would even have you end it with a piece of writing. But there will be a short, sweet piece of writing in the chat box. So I'm going to share the 5 steps for effective discussions. And your thinking job is which step, just type in a number, which step is your strength and which step is a growth opportunity for you. So here we go. Be ready to add to the chat box after I introduce all 5. The first one is you have to plan for the discussion. What's your ultimate goal or objective for the lesson? How much time are you going to have? Is it just going to be a turn and talk? No, you're going to go deeper, right? You're going to go deeper. But how much time are you going to give them? And by the way, what are your ground rules for staying focused, listening actively? Have you trained them and shown them and given feedback on active listening skills? What about contributing to the conversations? What about staying open-minded? How will you prepare the students? You're going to give them some just one article to read? Are you going to pre-teach some vocabulary words ahead of time, which I highly, highly, highly recommend? Years of research that when we pre-teach vocabulary before students read, comprehension goes up drastically. There's a 0.94 effect size when we pre-teach vocabulary. And it makes sense because while they're reading, they're going to come across that word. And we hope that they can say, oh, that means this. Let me reread that differently now. My hope is they'll use those vocabulary words in their discussions as well. Number two, is this one your strength or growth opportunity? Launching the discussion. How will you partner the students to discuss the question? Will you brainstorm questions or topics the students want to discuss as a whole group, or will you use PIP? That's my hope, is you'll use PIP. Will you pose an opening question or a controversial issue? And sometimes their questions are very controversial that they design. Number three, are we encouraging student participation in discussion? I had a group of students one year where they just were so quiet. So I had to do something called penny for your thoughts. I gave them 2 pennies. I said, in your discussion, in your student-led discussions, you have to contribute 2 things, at least 2 things. And once you contribute, you put the penny in the middle. Now, I didn't have to do that with other classrooms, but there was this one particular classroom where it was a penny for your thoughts. Will you provide think time? Will you offer options for anonymous sharing so they don't have to put their name on it maybe? Will students have access to resources to find their answers? Well, maybe the book that they just read that has the question in it, maybe they tabbed it with sticky notes. Maybe they annotated within the text so that they can go back to the text. That's my hope. We'll use a system to encourage discussion, like roll cards. And here's number 4. Guiding the discussion. Will you have an agenda or an outline? Will you have stopping points where you bring them all back as a whole classroom? Will you consolidate key points orally or in writing? How will you bring the discussion to a close? We've got to definitely bring closure to the whole discussion. And what will you do if discussion gets heated? Do you have any tools? I'll never forget a group of girls I had in my classroom one year when they were all wanting to answer at the same time. And they had this passion that I love. I love passion. But I had to teach this group a little tool called the talking pen or the talking stick or the talking marker, whatever it might be. But that means the leader has to pick it up and say, we're going to take turns. So when the leader picks up the talking stick or the talking pen or a marker, whatever you want to call it, it means everyone needs to stop talking and we're all going to take turns. And yes, the leader can go first or the leader can ask someone else to go. But just that one little tool saved these girls on a regular basis for getting, for making sure that everyone could contribute to their wonderful discussion. And then how are you going to assess the discussion? You're going to listen to one group. Are you going to rotate around the room so you can get a little bit of information from each group? Are you going to have a little cruising clipboard where you document some of the things that they're saying? How are you going to make sure that they believe they did an excellent job? You're going to have a little short, sweet little self-assessment. Anyway, I give you all of this because these are 5 big steps that we have to make sure we think through before we allow that discussion to start. So right now, which one of these 5 steps, here's the 1, 2, 3, here's the 4 and the 5, and here's a little summary on the right-hand side. Of these 5 steps, please write next to the S, which number is your strength? So maybe number 1 is your strength, put a 1 by the S. Maybe, and by the way, GO stands for growth opportunity. Maybe number 5 is your growth opportunity. Like maybe they just have discussions and you can't get around and give feedback. So if you could light up again the chat box, which one of these steps is a strength and which one of these steps is a growth opportunity. I love to see what my audience, a lot of people are saying number 1 is a strength. Excellent. Strength number 4, guiding the discussion. Beautiful. Growth opportunities, I see some 3s and some 5s, a lot of 3s and 5s. Okay, excellent. And you know what I love is that's a little checkoff sheet for you. So if 5, let me go back to it. If 5 is a challenge for you, those are just 3 questions you can ask yourself and say, if I want to get better at 5, what do I need to do intentionally to encourage that reflection, to give my students a student self-assessment afterwards? And then will I have them write about it? Will there be an exit ticket afterwards? Or am I just really going to dive in and listen as the best that I possibly can to all of my students? So thank you for contributing, by the way, I appreciate that. Well, the two most common missteps that teachers make when executing group work are, number one, not having a group worthy task. And number two, not requiring individual accountability. It is very important to end PIP with some type of individual accountability. Yes, it's all group work at first, but will you have an exit ticket that you will end it with? Or maybe a writing template? I am going to give you one in case you want to end it with a strong piece of writing. And we got to make sure it's a group worthy task. I'll tell you right now, PIP will lead to a group worthy task because it's all about open-ended questions. It's all about them choosing which question they want to dive a little bit deeper into. Or as a whole class, Mrs. Nicholson, can you teach us information that covers this question? There's so many ways to respond to the beautiful questions that they design. Now, I do want to remind you of several options, several ways that you can get kids in groups for PIP. And there's several different ones. I never do it randomly. No way. I don't like random grouping. I think that it can cause a lot of problems, but I like the other four. So I'm going from right to the left, and I put random grouping there because it is a type of group that I do have to address. But let's go to the second one, readiness groups. There are times I do want students who think at a whole nother level to work with each other. And I love when students who are challenged with certain vocabulary words, I get to work with them and go deeper and teach them even more words to help them with their PIP process. So there's a time to put them in readiness level groups and give them the support that they need or less support because maybe they don't need as much support. Definitely you can group them by interest. So you can group them first heterogeneously for PIP and then move into, hey, which question's most interesting to you? And then move into those groups and answer the question that's most interesting to that student. Efficiencies, that's a whole nother workshop right there. But that very last one on the left-hand side, I usually heterogeneously group my students for the PIP process. Okay, so students were reading about it and they had some discussions about it. And that means in a discussion, we got to give them a prompt. Now in PIP, they design their own prompts, their own questions, but let's just say you want to give them the prompt. You certainly can. So I'm talking about all kinds of discussions right now. You or the students need to design some type of prompt that gets them excited and is relevant. And so we give them that prompt, or they have that prompt at their fingertips, and they think on their own, maybe even like writing on their dry erase board their answer or what they think it might be, maybe on a sticky note. And then they share in small groups and they have these agree, disagree. We give them some prompts. I'll give you some prompts as well to help them have a better discussion. And then prompt one could truly be about the thinking job of the reading. And then prompt two could be that deeper dive with the question that they designed or the question that you give them. In all conversations, though, if you do not have criteria for success, you're going to get something we call in education DS. And that stands for diddly squat. Raise your hand if you've ever had diddly squat. I'm going to say discussions in your classroom. I'm raising mine, by the way. And it's when I didn't give them a clear picture of what I really needed in their discussions. So here's an example of criteria for success for a discussion. Our discussions will focus on the prompt. Our discussions will give everyone opportunities to participate. Our discussions will use some key vocabulary terms that Mrs. Nicholson gave to us. And our discussions might need to have some sentence starters in them. And I always make sure to give them that. Now, if I want them to do number three, if I want them to include some key vocabulary terms, I better splash the words up there that I have pre-taught them while they're reading about the topic. Let's say the topic's the ocean. I love the ocean. I know Liz loves the ocean, and I know Liz's daughter loves the ocean. We were talking about that earlier. I mean, the ocean is just such a positive concept to talk about. But if I'm going to have my students read about the ocean and be really, I'm going to say, they have this background knowledge about the ocean, I'm going to have to splash some words up to teach them about the ocean. Now, by the way, these are not ocean words. This is just a word splash that I might give to teachers. Because if you ask them to use the vocabulary words that you took the time to pre-teach before they read, If you ask them to use it, you got to give them the words at their fingertips. And we don't want them to say IDK. We don't want anyone to say, I don't know, I'm passing. Nope, I don't want them passing. Now they can pass and come back to them always. Okay, that's not a bad thing at all to do. But you will have less kids pass if you give them this. Now, by the way, I just found these on the internet. They're all over the place. Meaningful conversation stems. I respectfully agree, or I respectfully disagree with. I'd like to go back to what so-and-so said, or I want to piggyback off of what so-and-so said. And by the way, you can find these all over the internet, but my favorite ones I'm giving to you today. This is one that I use. It was like a placemat, and it was laminated, because sometimes in math, we use the math box. Clarifying statements could be used in math as well, but I had clarifying statements, sum it up statements, and what I am thinking statements ready to go at their fingertips. And I would say, hey, today, some statement stems that you might use in your discussion might be sum it up statements. Okay, you're gonna have many opportunities to sum it up. So you might want to put a little sticky note on sum it up statements on your placemat. That's where I think you might go today. By the way, create your own placemat of statement stems. And in the handouts, I did give you this in case you want it, but it's best when you design it with your students. And even after listening to them quite a bit in August and September, kind of leaning in and listening, how do they start most of their statements? Well, a lot of them is I. But there are some questions in here as well that they can use to, I'm going to say, elaborate within those rich discussions. Sometimes it's as simple as I just respectfully disagree with so-and-so because, and then having that evidence ready. Okay, so I just gave you some pointers for deeper discussions. But let me go back to number one here. Number one is either the teacher creates a prompt or the students create the prompt. And that's what we're going to focus on from the remainder on. I have built up the research for PIP. I have given you discussion tools that you might want to use during PIP. And now we're going to finally get to PIP, because PIP is a way to get your students, just 3 steps, to get your students to design better questions that they can dive deeper into the text to find the answers, or dive into other texts to find the answers, or do some research projects with one another. So now we're going to truly go into getting your students to create the prompt for the discussion, the question for the discussion. I can almost promise you, you will have much better discussions when they design the questions. But designing questions, as some of you said in the chat box earlier, is not that easy. We have to guide the process for thinking. You're going to need to model it quite a bit before you have the students engage in it. But I just love this quote. Jamie McKenzie has a whole website about questioning, so you might want to go and explore it. But Jamie says, questions may be one of the most powerful technologies invented by humans. Even though they require no batteries and need not be plugged into the wall, they are tools which help us make up our minds, solve problems, and make decisions. Questions are beautiful. Pat Wolf, an amazing cognitive scientist who's also an educator, who wrote many books about the topic. I actually went to a lot of her trainings as a teacher, but Pat Wolf was able to take the cognitive science that's out there and say, well, here are some possible implications for it in the classroom. And Dr. Eric Jensen is one of those people as well, one of my mentors. But questions are windows into student reading comprehension. Isn't that beautiful? The most effective practice teachers can develop is how to ask, extend, and teach students to generate questions that teach and motivate understanding of a text. And that's exactly what PIP does. Now, I'm just curious, has anyone ever seen this book? I had 2 of them in my classroom. And why 2? Because it was always missing. There was always a student reading this book. I even put it in my bathroom. And I kid you not, if I ever had like a party at my house, that book was always in a different spot by the end of the party. People want to know how come. They open up the book. Scholastic knew that if they formatted a book in a format of question, answer, they're going to keep more kids engaged in the book. And they were right. By the way, this is a series of books about all kinds of scientific concepts. that I know teachers who own the whole library. I owned many of the books, but the kids can't put them down. You want to know why? Because they want to know why. Why do volcanoes blow their tops? And earthquakes. I mean, I experienced one recently. And so what's going on? Why do they happen? Scholastic knew that kids, you could actually increase their stamina for reading with a format like this, QA. And I bet some of you own these books. Go ahead, tell me in the chat box, have you owned any of these books? I own the whole library of this one. If you lived at the time of blah, 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 whatever it might be, these kids could not put these books down in my classroom. And you want to know why? Because there was a question and they wanted to know the answer. So they kept reading. Yes, I know that Rachel has that. Teresa says that she has them too. You know these books. Absolutely. But the reason they're so famous is because kids like them. And why do they like them? Because of the format. QA. See, when there's a question that the brain goes, what? I want to know more about that. The brain is going to take more time to go figure it out. I laugh at my kids, Keaton and Aubrey. They're twins, boy-girl twins. They're 22. And when a question just pops up among our household, like let's say we're having dinner together, I'm very blessed when they both come home and we can have dinner together. But if a question pops in their head, they're on their phones. I mean, it's an immediate Google, right? They want to know, they don't wait anymore. So that's the good thing about that generation. It's like, well, let's just find out right now. But oftentimes the questions are just simple learning questions, but a simple learning question can take a student to a deeper dive. I remember my son in 3rd grade, he had a teacher named Mrs. Creighton, and he was just learning about space. And the teacher was just throwing some facts out there. And my son started to produce his own questions in his head. He didn't do PIP, which is what you're seeing right now. He just produced questions in his head. And then he just started thinking about it more. And he phrased his question differently. And then he came home and he prioritized his question. He goes, Mom, I need to talk to you. I'm like, oh boy, what did I do now, Keaton? He goes, why, Mom, why didn't you tell me that some of the planets you can't land on them, Mom? They're not all solids. Did you know that? And he goes, Mom, this just ruins everything that I had planned. And I'm sitting there, I wanted to laugh. But on the other hand, I'm like, why didn't I tell him that before his unit? Well, because I wanted Mrs. Creighton to do it. All because Mrs. Creighton said a few things and his brain was like, what? You can't land on all the planets, some are gas? Anyway, all I can say is simple learning, simple facts, simple things that they read can produce some amazing deeper questions. Okay, so here we are. Here is finally PIP. The 3 steps. Number 1, produce your own questions, students. We put them in purposeful, flexible groups, and we ask them to create the questions. We ask them to improve the questions. Then we ask them to prioritize the questions. Okay, so real quickly, let's try this out. The topic is ocean, just because Liz and I said so, right, Liz? And so, yes, right, Liz, we're just going to do ocean. So
sounds good to me.
Yes, that sounds good to me too. Right now, we're obviously not in groups of 4 or groups of 5. So could you just put a question in the chat box that you have about the ocean? Any question that you have, anything. Now, by the way, it doesn't have to be you. It could be a question that maybe your 5th graders have asked. Maybe it's a question you know that high schoolers might ask about the ocean. Just why is the ocean salinated? Thank you, Sherry. Has the salt? Yeah, how did it get the salt? Why does the ocean have different kinds of blue? Beautiful question. Is the Arctic Ocean always cold? How does the ocean get its waves? Yes, that's beautiful. Boy, you guys are going so fast. How much pollution is in the ocean? Ooh, good question. That's going to go along with our example as well that Rachel has. Why do the ocean have tides? By the way, I still can't comprehend in my head how the moon changes the gravitational pull of the waves and the tides. It just blows my mind. How deep are the currents in the ocean? Do mermaids really exist? Okay, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. And I know we've got more and more coming, but you just produced some good questions. Now, if we had time right now, I would improve every one of those questions with you. I would ask you to eliminate any closed questions. And closed questions means there are one-word answers. Okay, so if the answers are yes, no, or just has one word or vocabulary word as the answer, those are called closed questions. They're not horrible. They help us understand something better. But with PIP, we're going deeper. It doesn't mean you ignore all of those. You can answer them really quickly with yes, no's, or the students can answer them really quickly with yes, no's, but that's not the purpose of PIP. The purpose of PIP is to come together and to find from the kids their interests, their questions from their head. We're going to develop some deeper questions that we prioritize in our classroom and do something with them. So right now, the improve those questions means we would eliminate a few of yours if they have answers that are yes, no's, or not necessarily even eliminate. Could we change them so that they do become open-ended questions? That takes a little bit longer, doesn't it? But that's step 2. And we won't have time to do that right now. And then there's step 3 is now we have to prioritize your questions. And guess what? Step 3 is tough to do right now too, because we need a purpose. Now, if the purpose was about how the ocean impacts humanity, then I would go up and think, wow, that one question about pollution in the ocean is huge for me, right? But I have to make sure as the teacher, I state the purpose of these questions. Okay, so that was just fun, but now I'm going to give you step by step. Ready? Everybody's going to get step-by-step directions for this, and we're going to look at Rachel's example. And Rachel, I really hope you chime in with other little things that you learned as you contributed this wonderful example to our book. So the big picture of PIP is you have to model it first. Please do not just splash it onto your kids. And it's just best done when you take them through the process and you model your thinking as you take them through that process. I do recommend heterogeneous groups at first, but then towards the end, they can choose from among the priority questions, and they could choose by interest which ones they go deeper with and have a discussion with, or a piece of writing. When it can be done before, during, and after reading, but I'm going to say it's better and it's stronger when you use it during reading or after reading, because they have to know something about it to design these awesome questions. Hey, if you want them to design questions before reading, we do it all the time with KWL. This tool is just a little bit different in that we're trying to get some of the deepest questions out there. Why? To deepen thinking, discussions, and writing, to explore topics that kids are interested in. You're going to have high engagement when that happens. And to achieve a special purpose based on my standards, right? And that's going to help me form my purpose as well. So how? We got to learn the 3 steps. You might even create an anchor chart. Just draw one up. You're going to use this a lot throughout the school year in any content area. It can be used in math, social studies, science, business, obviously. And even in fiction stories, you can use it. I'm using it today mostly to help you with informational text. That's the example that Rachel and I are using. So let's look at the very first step. First and foremost, we got to get the kids to produce their own questions. Let's just say you've modeled this. Now it's their turn. So they're in groups of maybe 3 or 4. You can do 5. Even, Kagan and Kagan said, once you go past 4, it gets a little more challenging to engage all the students. So I still would love to keep it just with about 4. Okay, so they ask as many questions as they can. They just shout them out, and they don't stop to discuss, judge, or answer. And the scribe's going to write down every question that the kids brainstorm, and then they can change any statements that might just pop out of a student's mouth, because it absolutely could do that. So step 1 is you've got to share the goal of PIP with an anchor chart, get them excited about it. And you want to share the criteria for success, which I'm going to share with you right now. But you've got to get them excited with that learning target. We know the learning target is one of the very first steps when it comes to lesson planning. And the learning target I would share is, hey, students, we can design amazing discussion questions through a 3-step process called PIP. And I'm going to get my anchor chart out. I'm going to teach it to them. I'm going to model it. But let's say they've done PIP a couple times. They already know they're going to get this as their exit ticket. This is the checklist. In other words, if you want excellence in the PIP process, teachers, you have to tell them what you want. We call that the criteria for success. So the criteria for success for PIP is number one, every person is engaged in contributing questions from the reading. Everybody in that group has to contribute. Number two, every person engages in their roles. I'll show you the roles in a second. Number three, a list of brainstorm questions from all students in group that pertain to what they just read. There will be some crossing off of closed-ended questions. There will be circling open-ended questions, and there will be a written summary of the top questions that the group believes are priority and a reason for each of those priority questions. I already told you that this is best done with reading, pre-teaching vocabulary, and then C, we already know the teacher's going to model it. Okay, so that's step one. Produce your own questions. And teacher, when you are modeling, please make sure you're thinking aloud. I wonder why the author said this. I wonder, what does this have to do with this concept? What does blank mean? Now I know that's a shorter, sweeter question, but that's okay because it's popping in your head and you don't know what it means. And that finding out the meaning to a word can actually produce deeper learning and deeper questions. Simple learning definitely produces that deeper learning, but sometimes we have to understand the simple learning first. I think we all would agree with that. Why did this happen this way? And then if this is true, then what about blah, 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 blah. So create a list of questions and teachers write it out. Now, some of the roles your students can have, you can have a leader who asks questions to determine the priority questions. I'll give you a set of those. The encourager encourages everyone to participate. You've got to model that one or they'll get very bossy. A scribe who writes down the questions, circles the open-ended questions and crosses off the closed-ended questions, and the reporter. At the very end, the reporter can have to report out, our group chose the following 2 questions to be the priority questions, and here is why. Now, along this way, along the journey, you might need a cheat sheet. It's actually page 299 in my literacy triangle book when it comes out. It's out. I'm just waiting for it to be at my fingertips. But I've given you the open-ended question stems. So that is in the handout. So go grab it. Your students might need that cheat sheet. Now, that might be too overwhelming for some of your kids. So you're going to want to make it smaller. I just gave you a nice big list to start with. Okay, so now the kids just brainstorm all these questions and then they're going to improve their questions. And this is where I want to show you the example from Rachel. And Rachel, be ready to type in anything that I miss. But to improve a question, this is where you categorize them as closed or open-ended questions. And you definitely have to define those words. And you're going to need to show them some examples as well. So here's an example from Rachel's classroom. Rachel was a 5th grade teacher last year. Rachel, are you still teaching 5th grade this coming year? She's at Manchester Park Elementary, an amazing teacher. Oh, I cannot wait to see you in action. I'm coming there, Rachel, to visit. I taught in Olathe, and I do a lot of their summer conferences. And so anyway, but Rachel, you're a stellar educator. Those students are so blessed to have you. But here's one of her examples, and this is from a group of students. And you can see that they crossed off closed-ended questions, okay? And they circled the open-ended questions. And then this group, they starred 2 questions that they believe are the priority questions. Now, Rachel, did I miss anything? Now, I basically just showed you the whole PIP example right here. But the next step is we got to take every small group's starred questions, the ones that they believe are priority. We're going to have to take those and we're going to contribute them and have a huge class list of priority questions. And Rachel says, we did spend quite a bit of time discussing closed and open-ended questions because at first they wrote a lot of closed, absolutely. And we don't want to tell them that they're bad, right? We just want to encourage them to go deeper. That's what PIP does. But those closed questions, they have some really good ones up here, Rachel. Don't you agree? How long does it take to make a fossil fuel? I want to know. And how long does it take to break down fossil fuels? Those are very good questions, but they're not going to become the priority based on the purpose that Rachel had for them. And with that in mind, then there's number 3. Number 3 is possibly the more challenging part of it. Although once they master closed and open-ended questions, number 3 could be challenging because now they have to prioritize which 3 are the most important. Now, for them to prioritize, here's what you have to do as a teacher. You have to give them a purpose. Is this whole PIP tool being used because you are going to study it further? Is it going to be a jigsaw for researching them? Is it going to be a little writing? Is it going to be a project? Are they going to create a PowerPoint over it? Are they going to interview an expert about it? I love this. Rachel says, when they researched later to answer their priority questions, they found a lot of answers to the closed by accident. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Rachel. Beautiful contribution. And here's some question prompts to help your students with prioritizing. Which questions interest you the most and why? Maybe that's your purpose. Which questions should we have a deeper discussion about and why? Which questions do you think are the most important for our purpose today and why? Which questions do we want to answer in our writing? So this could end in a beautiful piece of writing, which is my hope, which questions do we want to explore further as a class based on my standards maybe? And which questions do you believe should be on our unit test and why? They're probably going to choose the closed-ended questions for those. But anyway, and here's the final product. So this is a list of all the high priority, questions that Rachel gathered from all the different groups in her classroom. And then they circled these 3. They came to a consensus. Now, Rachel, I do want to know, how challenging was it for them to come up with these 3? I mean, those are 6 beautiful questions, but did they have a really hard time choosing those 3 as the class priority questions? And so as she does that, as she answers in the chat box, I do want to share with you, those are 3 beautiful questions. And I'm going to guess that her purpose basically was about how plastic can be harming the earth. And if that's the purpose, those are 3 beautiful priority questions. And then she ended it with having them go back to the criteria for success and place a check mark. We did this, we did this, we did this, we did this. So Rachel says that there was a lot of discussion and debate, but they ended up choosing ones that were similar among the groups. I love it. They care about each other, and your classroom was just so harmonious with all the beautiful examples that you engaged in. And so now, what do we do with those questions? You have a lot of choices. You can use them to guide in the rich discussions. And I gave you the 5 pointers for rich discussions, right? 5 things you need to do to have better discussions. Could be research. Maybe there's a jigsaw and you regroup kids by interest, which question interests them the most. And then they use these questions to guide student writing. Here is, it could be a simple exit ticket. So I gave you some exit ticket prompts on the left-hand side of the slide, or it could be the template over on the right-hand side. So the template I gave to you as well in the back of this packet, just in case you're interested in using it. Whew, so there it is. Here's the PIP technique. But I got your attention by giving you the research, all the different high impact tools that go into PIP. Amazing, still amazing to me. And these 3 steps, and there's a whole book explaining the power behind this question formulation technique. And so we just accomplished our 2 big learning targets in this power hour. And right now, if you could light up the chat box, what was the most valuable piece of information that you gathered from the whole thing? Maybe even tell me which step was your favorite in the PIP. Maybe it's research. Maybe it was those 5 pointers for how to ensure that you have better discussions. But if you could add it to the chat box, that helps me with closure. And yes, Sherry, love the prioritize. Yeah, that's tough. That one's a little bit tough because we're going to have to prioritize it based on the teacher's purpose that you may have to give, improving the questions. And by the way, if you want on my, I guess you can say email list, I do have a newsletter that comes out every 2 months. I took a little hiatus from it just because I wanted the teachers to have a break. But I have one coming up in August. And it is on literacy. And so I hope that you will want this free newsletter. It comes every 2 months. And I hope that you'll engage in it. If you do want that, just go straight to this QR code And that's all I have for us today. Liz and Saddleback, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your wonderful webinars. All your webinars are just amazing, and I learned from them still. And Rachel, thank you for being here, Rachel. Woohoo!
Yes, thank you, Rachel. That was so great that she was on to kind of fill in some of the gaps and some of the details of how this unfolded with her students. Really, really valuable. There was a question that came in. I didn't want to interrupt you because you were on a roll, but I think it was Jennifer had asked a clarifying question and wanted to know that the group work, when the students started working on generating the questions, that occurs after they've read something.
Well, technically PIP could be used before reading,
Okay.
But they don't know enough, in my opinion, to formulate the deeper questions. So I like for them to have some background knowledge, quite a bit of background knowledge on the topic through reading. And so it can happen in the middle of the reading so that they want to read further. But I love when it's towards the end of the reading or at the end, because then you have some type of writing extension or discussion extension. But by the way, even during reading, if you create a stopping point, teachers, you can have a stopping point and do the PIP process, and it's going to promote better discussion then. So it can be during or after, definitely before. They just don't have as much background knowledge to create the deeper questions.
Got it. Okay.
Did I answer that? Did I?
Yes. Yeah. I think there was, you were sort of on a roll with the PIP process, and she just had that clarifying question about, if a certain degree of reading has to occur before they can begin that process.
Awesome.
So.
And I'm reading through everybody's MVPI, the most valuable piece of information they just learned. Thank you, guys. The question stems, yes, are critical. And then you're going to have to show them how to get into the discussions, use those 5 pointers to discuss those power questions, those prioritized questions. Okay, I think
there were 2 more questions. One actually came in before the webinar. And I mean, I think the answer to this person's question is to look at implementing PIP, right? But let me go ahead and read the question so I get it right. This is from Linda. And she said, I'm rethinking my approach to student-generated questions for this upcoming school year. She teaches junior high social studies, and she has typically handed out a Bloom's taxonomy page with levels and sample question starters. I'm rethinking this approach and wondering if I should narrow the choices for students and direct them to 2 or 3 practice stems to practice using more often, mastering a few instead of hoping they will choose one from many. So she was that's what she's been doing, and she's looking to kind of rework that. And I think just trying PIP instead would probably be the way to go. Yeah. So I hope she's able to catch this webinar and learn and try to implement that. I think that would be great. And I'll actually let you chime in and answer her question, since that's what I asked you to do.
No, I love it. And Liz, I absolutely agree with you. I remember doing that too. I wanted them to learn the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. I had question stems ready for each little set, and you can still use that. But you really need to model those types of questions and show them the power behind the answer when we do that. But remember, it's the question stem plus the content. I mean, there are people say, oh, I created an analysis question because I had them do this and this, but no, you've got to make sure they're really analyzing some content deeper too. It goes hand in hand with content and that beginning of that question stem, even depths of knowledge. It's not just, oh, I'm level 2 for sure because I'm starting my question this way. No, you got to look at the content too. And that's a whole nother workshop. Eric Francis is a very good friend of mine, a colleague, and I know he's spoken with Saddleback before, but Eric Francis is the king of depths of knowledge. But it's not wrong at all to share those tools with the kids and help them understand the different levels of questions. But PIP, you don't really even need to know the levels, do you? Because it's based on their interests. But we hope that we do come up with some deeper questions at the very end. And obviously, Rachel showed us that yes, you can, and yes, you will.
Thank you. There was one more question, and then I think we can wrap it up. And the question came in earlier, and it was about the book. And it was specifically about, is this book specifically a K-8 book? What's the application in 9 through 12, and what's the application for students with special needs or or who are English learners or multilingual learners.
Okay, well, Rachel can chime in as well because she reviewed the book and wrote a nice little saying for the book too. But it is a K through 8 book because that's how Solution Tree publishes books. They very rarely will do a K through 12 book because high school teachers will not buy a book with a K on it. And I understand that. But every single strategy, I truly believe almost every single strategy, there might be 5 or 6 that are definitely primary oriented. I believe every single strategy can be used at the high school level. Do we have high school examples in there? No, we had to use K through 8 examples simply because we narrowed it here. For special ed students, the book is amazing for. We have several ways to bump it up, make it more challenging, make it more enriching, every single strategy, and several ways to break it on down. We have a lot of EL strategies listed for almost every single tool. And so I share this with you because I do believe it's K through 12, but we had to narrow it down to K through 8. And yes, there are some tools that are just for primary students. And we have this wonderful, I'm going to say, checklist at the top of each strategy that says this is more for primary, this is more for reading, discussing, or writing, or all three. And so we do give you a cheat sheet right above each tool. And there are over 50 tools explicitly defined and step-by-step process, and you get templates galore. So I can't wait to see the book. I have seen it in PDF, but I am waiting for it to arrive July 15th. And the book is available on Amazon. And the book is also available at the Solution Tree website. And it is called The Literacy Triangle. And I'll say it again, The Literacy Triangle. And again, one of you will be getting a free book after I look at the tweets. I'll give you a
remind us again of what you're looking for in the tweet for our potential winner.
I'm looking for an awesome connection that somebody made with the training, something that they want to use, something they want to do with it, just some type of connection with their grade level or reading, discussing, or writing, whatever it might be. But don't just reiterate what I said. Make some type of connecting statement because I love to see what you got out of it personally.
Yeah. This is a great session, and I agree with you, Cassie. She said she appreciates how PIP naturally scaffolds the learning and provides opportunities for differentiation. I completely I see that. Yeah. I think it's extremely useful, and I'm so glad you were able to join us today and share. Well, we are just about out of time, so let me go ahead and let everybody know what is coming up next. Not next week, maybe it's the week after. Yes, we're taking a break next week, but then we will return on July 28th with another episode of Coffee with Katie and Richard. You know them, you love them. They're on our webinar platform every 6 to 8 weeks. And this time they're going to, I guess, start getting our brains warmed up for the beginning of the school year. It's almost time to switch our brains back over to planning for the upcoming school year. So the topic here is going to be setting up your classroom for productive learning. We have Katie and Richard joining us. You can actually go to the website right now to register. And of course, we also send out the emails prompting you to register, so you can register that way as well. Either way, we hope to see you there. We know it's always a fun session with Katie and Richard. I know you know both of them.
They're my good friends.
Yeah, they're wonderful. I
might just chime in just to give them a hard time and smile at them.
I mean, please do. We love that. And you brought up Eric Francis, and I definitely have to reach out to him. We have not had him on a webinar. Oh. I can't believe it that we haven't had him on a webinar, but well, hopefully that will change very soon.
Absolutely. And Liz, can you go back up to the slide that has the Twitter handle?
Oh, yes.
Somebody just really wanted to see that.
There you go.
Make sure you do Saddleback as well. Saddleback and me. And then we will look at that. And I don't have a hashtag for it. You can create one if you want.
So that's just to be clear, that's L Nicholson 1 for LeAnn's Twitter handle. So I can't wait to see the tweets and see what people share. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And thank you again, LeAnn. And we will see everybody in a couple of weeks with Katie and Richard. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Happy summer, everybody.